What if I told you that you could eat a huge bowl of delicious homemade pasta and not get bloated or gain weight? Well, it's true, it's possible, and we're going to talk about that today.
Today we are going to make pasta from freshly milled wheat, and I'm going to be using durum wheat because pasta is traditionally made with semolina flour, and semolina flour comes from durum wheat. So if you've been following along, I've been experimenting with different kinds of grains, from ancient grains to newer heritage grains. And durum is an ancient grain. It's actually a descendant of emmer wheat, and that is probably what was used in the Last Supper. The first Eucharist was emmer. The oldest variety of wheat that was ever cultivated was einkorn. We've talked about einkorn. I've cooked with einkorn. I have some einkorn recipes on my blog. And then emmer is the second oldest variety of wheat. Durum is descended from that. So this is an ancient grain. And when you mill durum wheat, you get durum flour. Then when you sift that durum flour and you sift out the bran and the germ, you're left with the endosperm. That's what semolina flour is. So semolina flour that's used to make traditional pastas, it is a sifted flour. That is not what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to go all the way up until that step. I'm going to mill my own durum wheat into durum flour, but I'm not going to sift it. And you guys know why. We've talked about this. When you sift freshly milled flour to remove the germ and bran, you're removing almost all of the nutritional content. All you're left with is the starchy endosperm. That's not a whole product. It's not a whole food. It's a partial food. It's a processed food. And when we ingest sifted flour, it's a lot harder for our body to digest that. So we're going to leave it intact. We're just going to mill this durum wheat into durum flour and make some pasta. My daughter absolutely loves to bake, and one thing that I'm teaching her is that ingredient quality matters, not only for taste and presentation, but most of all for our health. And shopping with Thrive Market makes it so easy for me to source quality ingredients and groceries for my home. Thrive Market is an online grocery store. They have all the things that you would find at your local grocery store, but you don't have to worry about scanning ingredient labels because they have banned over 1,000 toxic ingredients to date. Shopping with Thrive Market is so simple. I just open up the app, load up my cart, and I'm good to go. I know that nothing I add to my cart will have high fructose corn syrup or artificial sweeteners or food dyes. Thrive Market is the most affordable, convenient grocery delivery service that I have found that delivers straight to your door. They have monthly and annual membership options. The monthly membership is $12 a month, and the annual membership is $59.95 a year. That is dirt cheap. It is less than half the price of some of the other grocery delivery services that I've tried. And what I really love is that there are no hidden fees. There's not, markups because you're getting items delivered. You get the same low prices all the time, and Thrive Market does price match. There's no tips, no delivery fees. The price that you see is what you pay, and all orders over $49 ship for free. Plus, Thrive Market ships from zero waste warehouses, and they donate a membership to a family in need for every paid annual membership. So they're doing their part to be environmentally friendly and be charitable as well. Thrive just permanently lowered prices on over 800 customer favorites, so now would be a great time to join. And when you do so using my link, thrivemarket.com/Hopewell Heights, you will get 30% off your first order plus a free gift worth up to $60. I'll put more details in the description below the video, so just tap the more button and check it out.
I store my grain mill and my Bosch mixer in an appliance garage over there on the far side of the kitchen by the refrigerator and freezer, and that works nicely because then they're not taking up counter space, and they're great, but they're just not the most aesthetically pleasing appliances. So I moved my grain mill over here so you guys could see it really well for this video. It's kind of hard to film over in the corner where I keep them. So I am adding the durum wheat to my grain mill here. This is going to just take a minute maybe to mill this wheat, and this is what we're going to start with. So there we go. Now the wheat has been milled, and there is my freshly ground durum flour. If I wanted to proceed and make a true, authentic semolina flour, I would need to sift this flour, but I'm just not doing that right now. That's not something that I plan on doing at all in the future, especially because of my sensitivity to wheat that has been processed in that way. But it's something fun that you could try out if you wanted to. Try sifting different kinds of flour, whether it's soft white wheat, which is pastry flour. You could sift that if you want a really light and airy cake, or you could sift your durum wheat for semolina flour for pasta. But you'll see that this pasta dough came together just beautifully with the true whole wheat flour left intact. So now I'm adding all the ingredients for my sourdough pasta to my Bosch mixer. This is something that you don't need a mixer for. You can use a mixer if you want, or you can just add your flour to your countertop and make a well in the middle of your flour and then add all the ingredients and mix it by hand. That's how it's traditionally done by, pasta grannies. So this pasta recipe calls for 3 cups of freshly milled durum flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, a half cup of sourdough starter, a tablespoon of olive oil, and 2 eggs. You might have noticed that I added freeze-dried eggs because I am not getting many eggs from my chickens right now. So it worked just fine. I'm continuously amazed at how well the freeze-dried eggs work in baking or in any recipe that I need them, really. So I just had to be sure to reconstitute and add water to make up for, the liquid portion of the egg that was dehydrated. When I am milling grain to make flour, I always mill a little bit more than I need. That way I can feed my sourdough starter with the leftover flour, and that way I have just a little bit of leftover freshly milled flour for dusting my countertops or anything that I might need. But I don't mill large amounts of flour at once. I just mill what I need and maybe a little bit extra to make sure that I can use it up right when I'm doing whatever project I'm doing, or at the latest by the next day. So here is the pasta dough. It just came together so well. It's got a beautiful color from the eggs that I freeze dried and the durum wheat. When you mill it, it's just the most beautiful, rich yellow flour. I really do not notice a difference in the texture or composition of the dough using freshly milled whole wheat durum as opposed to white flour. It turned out great. So if you're worried about having pasta that tastes like cardboard, this will not be the case if you make it this way. I know that I cannot serve store-bought whole wheat pasta to my family because it is absolutely disgusting. Sorry if you like store-bought whole wheat pasta, but I don't know what's going on there, what they do in the process of making that makes it, it just tastes like cardboard, and we are not fans. However, this homemade pasta that is truly whole wheat and much healthier than the store-bought, supposedly whole wheat stuff is delicious. So like I said, I'm just not sure what's going on there in that cardboard pasta you get from the store. After I kneaded my pasta, I wrapped it and I'm letting it rest for about a half an hour. If you have an hour or so to let it rest and ferment a little bit with the sourdough starter, then that's great. You can also put it in the fridge and let it ferment overnight or for several days before you prepare your pasta. So if you're really wanting it to long ferment, I would recommend doing that. You could even make a really big batch of this pasta dough and then put it in your fridge for several days or up to a week and really let it ferment and break down, and then roll it out and dry the pasta, save it, use it later, however you want to do it. But I am actually going to use it today, so I'm just letting it rest for about a half an hour. I have found that with freshly milled flour, it is better to let your pasta dough rest before you roll it out and cut it into noodles. So as I am letting it rest. I got some water heating up on the stove, and now I'm making some Swedish meatballs. This recipe is on my blog. I have been in this season of gut healing and just kind of making it day to day. So my creative energy is just very, very low. I have not been putting out a lot of new recipes. I'm just sticking with what I know, making all of the old faithful recipes that I know my family likes and will eat. And I've had a lot of thoughts about stepping away from YouTube for a while until this season passes and until I have more creative energy and I can bring you guys a lot of really fun, exciting projects and recipes. But then I think back to one of the reasons why I started this channel, and it was to take you through all of the seasons of motherhood. And I really try to be authentic without oversharing and stepping into sharing, too much of private details about my family. But the reality is that this is part of motherhood, especially if you're open to life, to new life, and you have babies coming every year or two or whenever. You're going to have seasons where you are just kind of taking it from day to day. You're doing what works. You don't have all kinds of inspiration and energy. It's just learning to live in and even find joy in the mundane. And that's where I'm at right now. So I'm going to keep bringing you guys videos unless something changes. So let's get back to our pasta here. I am ready to go. I got my meatballs prepared and they're cooking. So now I'm going to work on rolling out my pasta. I usually divide it into a couple of sections of dough. It's just a lot easier to handle. You'll see what I mean. I have had this little manual Atlas pasta machine for a couple of years now. I've got a few videos where we've done this. We've made homemade pasta, but I was using white flour. That's the difference. The difference this time is I'm using, the freshly milled flour. But anyway, the pasta machine is great. I would highly recommend it. I know you can buy attachments that go on a KitchenAid mixer, and I have friends who make their pasta that way. They use a KitchenAid attachment. So if you have a KitchenAid, then that might be something to look into. I just really like this manual pasta maker. And I've told you all before, I like manual tools because, if there was a situation to where the grid went down and the world collapsed, at least my family would have homemade pasta. And that is what's really important. I'm kidding, kind of. But now that makes me think, well, what would I do about milling my grain? And that's not the first time I've had this thought. I have looked into manual grain mills. By the way, here are the sheets of pasta rolled out. So you can see that it rolled out just beautifully. Very easy to work with. And that was something initially I was concerned with when I started making pasta from freshly milled grain. I was just concerned that it would be like the cardboard pasta you buy at the store when it's labeled whole wheat, but it's nothing like that. Honestly, I really couldn't even tell a difference in this pasta as opposed to pasta that I made with white flour. If anything, it actually tasted better. It had a really rich taste with lots of depth, but the dough was just as workable. But anyway, back to grain milling in apocalyptic scenarios. That is something I've thought about because, like I said, I don't live in fear. I don't sit around just worrying about these things. I enjoy it. I like thinking about these things. I really think there's something to being a millennial and just growing up, where half of your day at school was spent playing Oregon Trail. Like, I'm into this stuff. I really like it. So anyway, I've looked into the manual grain mills, and there are some really cool ones that, they're like huge cast iron mills on a wheel that you have to manually turn. But I don't know, they're really expensive. The grain mill that I have, I got for around $200, and you can get really good electric grain mills for about $200. I'll link the one I have, by the way. But the really good manual ones, they can be over $1,000. And honestly, if I'm being perfectly honest, I just haven't been able to figure out how to frame a conversation with my husband in which I ask for $1,000 manual grain mill. Like, I haven't been able to come up with a scenario in which I ask him that question and he doesn't think I've completely lost it.
I've got half of a crock pot full of leftover gravy from Thanksgiving. So I'm just gonna use this as the base of my pasta sauce, because this pasta sauce, how I make it is I make a roux with butter and flour, and then I add in beef broth and then heavy cream. Well, this gravy is just the first part of that. It's the roux with butter and flour plus beef broth and salt and pepper. So all I have to do is heat this up and then add the heavy cream, and I'll probably do like some Italian seasoning, and it's the same as if I would have made the sauce, you know, from scratch right now. So many recipes really do start with just a nice butter and flour and broth roux, whether it's soups or sauces or gravies or cheese sauces, lots of things. So that is a kitchen fundamental, something that you need to know how to do, because now I'm gonna be able to put all of this to use.
While the sauce is heating up, I'm going to cook the pasta. My water is at a rolling boil, and you do want to cook freshly made pasta. You want to boil it in water. You know, I made a lot of one pot pasta recipes in the past, and that works great with dried pasta. You can add dried pasta straight into the pot with whatever sauce you're working with, and it will work beautifully, but it doesn't work very well with fresh pasta. The pasta kind of turns to mush. So I am boiling it here. This is not a one pot recipe, but like I said, this recipe for Swedish meatball pasta is actually on my blog, and I'll link both versions of the pasta. So if you're not a sourdough person, then you can make my regular pasta recipe. If you don't mill grains, that's fine. You can still make your own pasta, baby steps. You know, if I would go back 10 years and tell myself, like, I've told you guys this before, I'm so glad that as a new wife and mom, I was really not on social media. I think I had a Facebook page where I would occasionally post a cute little picture of my kids or something, but I just wasn't online. And I'm so glad, because I think I would have been absolutely paralyzed with the amount of information. And I would have thought, how am I ever going to have all this knowledge? How am I ever going to learn all these skills? And I think it would have made me feel defeated. And I'm usually not the kind of person that gets overwhelmed like that. But with homemaking, there's just so much in the art of making a home that has been lost that, yeah, it can feel kind of intimidating thinking about relearning all of these skills. So just remember that. One thing at a time, baby steps. Pick a skill and give yourself a month, 2 months, master that skill, and then move on to something else. Because when you're making a home, especially in the kitchen, a lot of skills also involve tools, and that's not unusual. Most trades, most jobs, most vocations or callings involve using tools. And tools, including kitchen tools, cost money. So, you know, I think it's really common that, I know I've been guilty of this. There's a new skill I want to learn. I buy all the stuff and then I get overwhelmed, and the tools just sit in my kitchen for like 6 months before I get around to learning. So that would be a piece of advice that I could take for myself as well. Just pick a skill, dedicate a month or two to learning it, get the tools, and don't move on to the next skill until you have actually used those tools and mastered that skill.
There we have it. Authentic Durham wheat pasta with the whole grain left intact. It can be done. The texture is awesome. This looks fabulous. I did cheat and I tried a bite and it was delicious. I have 2 pasta recipes on my blog. One is for pasta without sourdough starter, so just, you know, regular egg pasta, and the other one is for sourdough pasta. That is what we made today, and it was about a 1-to-1 ratio. So when I use freshly milled Durham wheat as opposed to white flour, it was about 3 cups. I used about the same amount, but as always, you know, you can always add more flour, but you can't take it away. So when in doubt, add a little bit less, look at the texture of your pasta dough, and then add more until you reach that desired texture. And then remember, when you're working with freshly milled wheat, it does take time for that whole wheat flour to absorb liquid. So before, if your pasta dough is looking a little bit sticky, let it rest for 5 minutes and then knead it again before you add any more flour. All right, it is time to feed my family. This is one of their favorites, so shouldn't be too many complaints tonight.
And the best part is that this is a guilt-free meal, a guilt-free comfort food meal, because this is truly whole food. This is whole grain pasta, so it's not going to make me bloated. It's not going to make me gain 20 pounds just by looking at it. And that wraps it up for this week's video, so I will see you all next week.